friends from the East Coast that are texting me saying, dude, we saw you on Good Morning America, InStyle Magazine, Yahoo News, we're calling to interview. So for me, that was really like, okay.
What's up with this Brazilian reviewing and talking about tequila, man? Like,
bars should really figure out how to work with people that are in the creator landscape.
What I don't like is this, some people come in with this entitlement of like, I have this many followers, put me in your bar or do this event for me. That's not how it works.
Do you think there's an end in sight for the tequila boom? And like, is there a spirit that you think people will kind of move to next?
Love that I get to do these things, and it's like something that I can never imagine could be my full-time job. But this feeling that at any time it can be taken away from me is scary.
Lucas Assis is a veteran bartender, cocktails and spirits enthusiast with over 400,000 combined followers on his Instagram and TikTok. You may have seen him reviewing and teaching about agave spirits with a big focus on tequila and mezcal, or you might have seen him making some killer cocktails. He is a fellow Brazilian and someone who haunted me with a demon doll down in Mexico recently. It was incredible to get to chat with him, and I really think you guys are going to enjoy this episode. First thing I got to ask you is, man, what's up with this Brazilian reviewing and talking about tequila, man? What's with that? Come on.
I know. The question I have is, are Brazilians mad at you for not doing cachaça?
I don't know if Louis is asking me that question himself. It's one of those things, you know.
Let's pretend it's just for you.
That's a fair point. So that is the teapot calling the kettle black right there.
Yeah, man. You know, it's one of those things. I get that all the time. I'm gonna say like once a day, I get a comment saying you should stick to cachaça or like, you know, talk about caipirinha. But it was one of those things that the way I found agave spirits was one through work. So I was working at a bar that was mostly just whiskey, especially during the time in LA was everybody was just doing bourbon. And it was, we had like a really awesome lineup. It was one of the first bars that brought Japanese whiskey to LA as well. And then when LA started making that switch into agave, where like, you know, that says Madre was up and Madre, the restaurant that I worked at also started to do that shift. And they hired a chef who still is really good friends with Guillermo Erickson Salza from Fortaleza, really good friends with Ron Cooper from Del Maguey. So it was like this perfect timing. And during this time too, you know, I was starting to go down to Mexico with my girlfriend at the time, my now wife. So I started to get exposure into Mexican culture and, of course, drinking tequila. Granted, bad tequila at the beginning, you know, like we all started. And so it was like this perfect timing of me going down to Mexico a few times a year with her and the bar that I worked at switching into agave spirits. And because of Sean, who was the chef, you know, I got to go down to Fortaleza, not in an industry trip. It was just like I was in Mexico and he put it together for me to go and see the distillery in 2018. So way before the crazy boom that Fortaleza had. This used to be like, you know, a little brand that nobody talked about that only bartenders knew because of their legendary industry trips. And I also got to go to Oaxaca and visit some of the Del Maguey palenques in Oaxaca. And that was like my first introduction into actually seeing things getting made. And I just fell in love with the art of agave spirits. And yeah, so then like I like something, I got obsessed. So I really started getting obsessed over tequila. And then I wanted to learn everything that I could and got to go every time we went down to Mexico. I would make a pit stop and like, you know, let's go to tequila again. I want to visit this distillery. And then through work, I was the buying manager at the time. So like all the reps would come in and I got to try different things like that too. So I gathered this knowledge of agave spirits, and then pandemic came. I was out of a job, like, you know, probably all of us. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So I started selling cocktails online, which I thought at the beginning, you know, there's no way LA is going to crack down on bartenders trying to make some money.
I don't want to interrupt you, but we got to come back to this selling cocktails online thing and discuss it, because I got to pick your brain about that a little.
Absolutely. I love to. So that was like the first introduction into the social media world, because I was selling the cocktails all through my Instagram. And when things started to open up, I was like, I don't want to get in any trouble. So I did a hard message like, guys, we're not doing this anymore. This has been fun. But then the people started questioning me to teach them how to make those cocktails that I was selling. And then I started making cocktail videos that then translated into me talking about my feelings and thoughts about the tequila industry. And that just took off, and I just was able to to capitalize on that, I guess. So that's kind of like a little bit of the story of how this Brazilian started talking about agave spirits.
No, that's awesome. And so, just for anybody else listening, how long had you been bartending prior to, I guess 2020, if that was the point when you started selling things online? How long had you been bartending for prior to that?
Bartending for about 8 years prior to that.
Wow.
And then in the industry for 10 probably at that time. Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I got my first restaurant job was right out of high school.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And so I guess if Leandro wants to jump in here and talk about the online cocktails, because I was just going to ask what happened after, but I guess just a nice interjection.
I just wanted to like point it out because I know that like when we get into the main body of the story of someone's work, it's real easy to just like gloss over things. But Lucas, you already kind of answered my question because I was like, because there was a minute during the pandemic where I was like, maybe we should do cocktail kits and we should do classes online. Because the thing is that as soon as the pandemic hit, I had a Barfly for 3 years already. So I was already doing an online presence, and then people started reaching out to me. And one of the people, like one of the organizations that reached out to me was like Sony Pictures was like, oh, we want to have like an industry happy hour kind of thing for the people that work remote. Do you want to teach a cocktail class? And I was like, sure. But here's how we're going to have to do it. I'm going to give you recipes and a shopping list. Everyone's going to have to buy their own ingredients and booze and stuff. And then I'll have the ingredients too, and I'll teach the class. And that's how I did it for a while. And I was like, this is so clunky. I just want to provide someone a kit with everything in it and little bottles of booze. And then you can make it's just easy. You ship the kits out and it's easy. But we could not find a legal way to do it. There's like, just because with like shipping restrictions and then also liquor laws being states, unless you go through a actual distributor, which is like almost impossible to do, it's hard to do legally. So then I was like, how were you doing cocktails? But then you just mentioned how, and I don't want you to say it out loud. So we can just
allegedly. It was during the time of
It's like, it's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Yeah,
and so,
exactly. Nobody cares.
And so you went from being a buying manager of the bar you worked at, and then the pandemic hit, and you were doing cocktail kits and classes online. So then once things started to open up again, how did that look for you? Did you then go immediately back to work? Because right now you're not working as a bartender, correct?
No.
Just for everybody listening.
No, just like guest shifts and stuff like that. I'm not at a bar. Yeah. So I'm trying to think. So I think it was like everywhere, right? But in LA had this whole like open, close kind of situation. The restaurant where I was the buying manager at, that shut down within like 2 weeks of the first shutdown. And to be honest,
my gosh,
even if there wasn't a pandemic, that place was going to shut down. Everybody that was working there, we knew that we could see the finish line. Like that place wasn't going to last very long, So that wasn't a surprise. But then I was working.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And then I was working at another place, Stella Barra in Hollywood. And that was a place that I had like 1 or 2 shifts a week. I would just pick up whenever I wanted. It was really good money. So I just kept that job. And when things started opening up, that restaurant wanted to open up. And they just went down the list. And I was like the bottom of the list because I had been there only for a year. And I only had a shift a week. So, it took a while for them to call me. But nobody wanted to go back to work. So they actually called me. And they're like, hey, we need you to come. Wow. Would you like to come back for work? And I said, yes. So I worked maybe a month and a half, 2 months there. And at the beginning, it was like, crazy busy and working with the shield and gloves and masks on top of the shoe. That whole miserable.
Oh, yeah. I remember those opening, those first baby steps. The opening, the reopening was
and they didn't know how busy it was going to be.
PTSD, to be honest with you.
Oh, man. It was rough because I was the runner, the bartender, the bartender. Like I was doing everything, you know what I mean? When people just like could finally go out and we kind of like all forgot how to behave in the social environment. It was like just miserable. Right. And then LA was like no more indoor, now just outdoor. So then we had to move outdoor. It was this whole mess. And we did that for maybe like 2 months. And then the place just called it quits and shut down too. So when that happened, for me, it was that switch that I was like, okay, I think at this time I had like maybe 10,000 followers on TikTok. And I saw kind of like this trajectory going that I could. And I was like, look, this is the only time that I'm going to be able to actually invest all my time in this. So let's see where it goes. So then I shifted the focus all into social media. And that's kind of, now, long story short, here we are.
That's great, man. I'm happy that it worked out for you. Because, I mean, I think back to those times, and it fills me with dread. But then also I realized, like, there was so many restaurants that didn't survive. And a lot of them around here, too. Like, a lot of some of the best ones in Boston, they closed. Luckily, one of them were able to reopen last year after, like, they were gone for, like, 3 years because the pandemic happened and they had to close. Leandro didn't want to renew it. It was a place called Eastern Standard. And they just finally reopened last year, thankfully. But
Standard? Or I thought Jackson Cannon made a new concept.
So Jackson Cannon has a new spot in Quincy, but then he just opened up Eastern Standard again back in, I believe, October of last year. And then he now has a speakeasy. So what he did too is they reopened Eastern Standard in this beautiful new building. So it's not in the same spot. It's like a block and a half away. But then they just opened a speakeasy in the back called, oh my gosh, I was there for my birthday and I'm trying to remember. Equal Measure, that's the name of it. So he runs he runs the whole Equal Measure as well as the whole bar at Eastern Standard, and I think he still has his joint in Quincy. Funniest time, like I had one of my reps bring him into my bar one time, and it was back like sort of coming out of the pandemic, so I was the only bartender. He's like, "Can I just step behind your bar?" And like Jackson Cannon just hung out with me behind my bar. It was just a random story for the day.
Jackson Cannon also had the Hawthorne, which from my friend Remy, who was actually just visiting me here in LA, used to work at. But I guess they closed down around the same time that Eastern Standard closed down as well.
Hawthorne's gone, unfortunately. But anyway, back to Lucas. Sorry, I got a little distracted here. So, and so then you started focusing on social media 100%. And then, obviously, I think that, right now there's so many people obsessed with tequila and craving tequila knowledge. And I think that you mentioned something about how a lot of bars used to talk about bourbon. When I started working at a craft cocktail bar, I worked at a spot literally called Bourbon's Kitchen and Cocktails. They were trying to capitalize on the wave of, craft cocktails and bourbon. And so at one point we had over 100 different kinds of American whiskey. And then obviously now what's funny is that my old boss is now trying to do more tequila as well in his program, because he's seeing, obviously, I think like how a lot of people are, that the transition from the general public has gone from bourbon and whiskey to agave spirits. And so did you just start, like, did it just catch fire one day, like posted a video about tequila, and then from then on it was like, oh, this is great, like let's go from there?
I was a little bit like that. I think the first video that I posted that I was like, oh, this is actually doing well, was a Negroni sour, and then a Negroni flip. It was a Negroni flip, when everybody was just like scared of the egg and that kind of stuff, right? And then I started making a cocktail about tequila, and more people started asking about tequila. And then I did started doing reviews, and that did okay. And then one day, and I got to give credit to credit is due, 818 came out, and I saw the bottles of 818 and their boxes that had the bad grammar in Spanish and all that. And I remember to today, we were literally, me and Michelle were going to the grocery store or something like that. And I told her, give me 10 minutes. I'm going to record this video really quick. So I just recorded this video talking about why I wasn't a fan of this. And the fact that she used bad grammar, and she tried the tequila with the fridge with the ice from the fridge and all those things, pointed all those things out, posted, and we left. And then I came back home, and then the video had gone, especially during that time, and it was 200,000 views by the time I got my phone again, and that was crazy. And that was kind of like a switch too. It was like, I need to start talking more about tequila. And then the next morning I wake up, the video has close to 1 million, and I had friends from the East Coast that are texting me saying, "Dude, we saw you on Good Morning America." So they showed my video on Good Morning America about that. InStyle Magazine, Yahoo News were calling to interview. So for me, that was really okay, I need to start talking more about tequila and the thoughts and ideas that I have about the industry. And that's when I really started to focus on the reviews and speaking about additives and tradition and no tradition, and why is that important, especially within mezcal and the process and all that. So I think it was this right place at the right time where people were finding out more about tequila, and tequila was growing, and I started to talk about it on social media. It was just this perfect timing.
I mean, I'm going to give you credit as well. I mean, a lot of the first videos that I really started getting into, you taught me a lot, and I ended up learning a lot through your videos, which ended up giving me, a lot more comfort in being able to then learn and do my own research and study more. And so, yeah, man, I discovered your stuff before I started posting my own stuff about tequila, and yeah, it was a huge help, obviously.
That's awesome, man.
And so my question to you is, from this huge craze, like, you know, we saw bourbon die down, obviously, over the last couple of years, and now tequila's on pace to outsell bourbon in America. What do you think? Like, do you think there's an end in sight for the tequila boom? And like, is there a spirit that you think people will kind of move to next?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's exactly like that. Like, just like bourbon had its time, right now it's tequila. I don't think tequila is going to go anywhere, just like bourbon isn't, right? It's just not the main thing, but you still have the crazy allocation.
And there's still like a rabid...
Exactly.
There's still a rabid appetite for bourbon. The rabid appetite. That's why secondary prices are so high.
Exactly.
Because the appetite isn't going away. It's just that the focus is kind of popularly shifted to tequila. But I would also argue, and maybe, I don't know if my timeline is off, I would also argue that it was really the popularization of mezcal that created the rabid tequila appetite, I think. Because I remember about, maybe my timeline is off, but I remember about 2009 or 2010 is when people, like the industry here in LA at least, really started to pay attention to mezcal specifically as like something that was, because, you know, the idea of what mezcal was a crappy spirit in a bottle with a scorpion in it, like, or like a worm, right? And it's like something that you got at like a truck stop in, in Baja or something, right?
Right.
And then I think the Del Maguey guys really got behind it and then really started pushing it. They started learning all about its ancestral roots and how incredible this spirit was, and then started pushing that. And then I think that really pushed tequila. And then obviously the celebrity element probably pushed the spirit. You know, the fact that so many celebrities are hopping on the, like following Clooney, know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's exactly what happened. I think Del Maguey doesn't get the credit it deserves with that. Wherever the brand may be now, and wherever problems people have with the brand, especially since, Pernod came in, there's no question that Ron Cooper is responsible for the mezcal boom in the world. He was the first one to figure it out.
Right.
Like he deserves that credit. And I think it's exactly that. Like, I think mezcal started coming in, especially into the cocktail scene. And then, brands like Patron with a bigger, reach and a bigger production value, I think they were responsible for some of that as well. I think, now they do I think they still have some great stuff. Some, especially their aged expressions are amazing. They now have some stuff that I'm not a fan of because Bacardi came in, and that's kind of how it goes, right? But yeah, so I think
that happens to every brand that gets popular.
Exactly, yeah. But then that's also a gave space to the small brands. Fortaleza, when they were this unknown brand, I remember people would come into the bar all the time and ask for Patron shots, and we didn't carry Patron, and I'd say, hey, try this Fortaleza brand, and they're like, I've never heard of that. I'm good. I'm like, try this. If you don't like it, I'll buy your shot. That was kind of like the idea. And everybody loved it for the most part. And I think that's like slowly how LA started making that hard shift into agave spirits. But I do think it's numbered. I do think there is a time that people are going to move on from it. But I think it's going to be a lot like bourbon. It's going to be there. There's going to be this group of people that are always going to like tequila. It's just not going to be on everybody's mouth like it is now. And I think personally, and I've been saying this for a couple of years, I think rum is the next big thing.
That's interesting.
I'm with you. I've been saying it for years too. And I think that as far as Mexico goes, they're going to discover Charanda as well.
Exactly.
Well, because rum is because I know a lot of people say this about mezcal actually, but I don't believe that this is true about mezcal. Although I will say that mezcal definitely carries with it the essence of the tierra, like the essence of the earth that it's made in. But I feel the same way about rum, that it carries the essence of the raw material. Okay. And it is the most distilled spirit in the world. 90% of the countries of the world create some type of rum, whether that's cachaça, whether that's charanda, because all these things have their own, like domain d'origin, Yeah, they got their own denomination, but they are technically rum because rum is just any spirit made out of sugar cane. So as long as it's made out of sugarcane, whether that's byproduct, whether that's sweet, whether that's the fresh juice, it's rum. And
Right.
so rum is the most nuanced spirit in the world. It has the most variety
question.
in flavor.
Right. Yeah. And terroir is still a huge part of it, right? Production methods are a part of it. Like, I think it'll be an easy transition for people to finally kind of grasp the idea of agave spirits and how that all plays a part, and then go into rum. And I think brands like Charanda and Paranubes and Dacaband are going to lead a little bit of like, hey, remember that Mexican spirit we really love? We also make rum here. And I think that they would then expand into like 90% of the world makes rum, and it can be, and it's even like cachaça. I was reading something too that like 90% of cachaça still stays in Brazil. It's not an exported thing. Like most tequila is exported, right? Most cachaça stays in Brazil. So it'd be exciting to see this going into a massive scale as well.
I think that you and I I think we were talking about it, Lucas, in Mexico about, and I had never made this connection. And I think that it was a genius connection on your part, talking about how the Charanda brands might be the bridge to rum, right? Because it's an easy sell to someone who loves tequila to then be like, hey, you love tequila, this thing that is made in Mexico in a lot of cases ancestrally and like all this really great stuff. Check out this Mexican rum brand. And I think that might be the gateway for a lot of folks who might not, want to pick it up on its own. And I think that maybe that would also open the door to cachaça, because I can't tell you how difficult it is to sell cachaça to an American English speaking audience. Like, it's like, oh, how do you say that? Cachaca? What's in that drink? The cachaca there? Yeah. So, and as a bar, well, like my bar, we have tons of cachaça, and almost like, I think like 60% of my cocktail menu is all cachaça. So like having to have those conversations, it's nice when you can do it at a bar, but it's tough. It's so difficult to sell it as a concept to people.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
Right. Although I gotta say, like, Charanda is something that everybody should be pushing, and not just because it's good, but also because it is facing an existential crisis right now, and it may go extinct because it is a very So Charanda is probably. I mean, I don't know if you want to fight with the Brazilians about it, but because
you're outnumbered here, man.
The same thing, but sorry, Charanda is one of, if not the oldest form of rum in the world. So like rum as we know it, right? Like molasses rum was developed in the 1700s, right? 1703 is like, if you Google it, that's like 1703 is the year that like rum was created, right? Mm. But Charanda, and then also cachaça too.
I was going to let you speak before I fight you.
No, these spirits have been around since the 1500s, right?
Right.
The thing is that Charanda is so niche that a lot of the families that are making it are turning to avocados instead, because it's an easier export, and it's a lot more profitable for them.
Or agave.
So I don't know. I loved Charanda ever since I tasted it. It like blew me away, and I've been a big fan of it ever since then. So I think we should all really be pushing it. Maybe we should make a chatanga, right? Batanga and Charanda. You got to stir it with a sword.
No, but it's very true, man, and it is.
Man. Like, maybe we should.
The next one we'll plan it out. But yeah, there
chatanga
is like,
week.
it is like,
and then we can make Kashanga week as well.
If we don't talk about Charanda, it really is. It's not like exaggerating what might happen. If the Uruapan brand stops producing, Charanda is done. They're the only one that's exporting. They're the only one that's doing
like
anything
the only
in
one,
Mexico. Like there's that I know of. There's other two brands in Michoacan that are still making Charanda, but to be honest, it's not quality product. Their name is not a name that's going to be exported, because it's literally like a what is it called? Something about like verga, that's the dick in Spanish, right? So it's not going to sell very well if they try to export it. So the Casa
they
Tarasco
named a Charanda brand verga?
It's something
really?
verga. It's like, I got to check, but I know there's verga in the name.
Don't tell me it's gran verga.
I need to check with them. The Casa Tarasco Spirits brand, who owns Charanda Wapan and all that, if they for some reason stop, Charanda's done. And that's what I love working and being friends with. So my wife's family is from Uruapan. That's where we got married. So we have a connection to where charanda is made, and we're pretty close friends with Miriam Pacheco and her family down there. And they don't have any plans on stopping, but they really are carrying this on their backs, and they don't want to really just,
Wow.
work in a marketing side to work on just promoting their brand, the Charanda Uruapan. They want to work as part of the domination of origin to bring more producers into growing more sugarcane and making charanda. Like not too long ago, there was probably 100 producers. Now there's 3. So it really is something that's
Wow.
we need to be careful. Yeah.
And I think it's crazy because if you look at how long it takes, and I know right now, like in Mexico, the big export is tequila and then mezcal, and that. What's crazy is that both of those spirits take so long to grow the plant before they can harvest. Whereas sugarcane, you can harvest twice a year. And if you have enough crop rotation, you could, in theory, be producing all year round as long as you rotate your harvest, right? So it's a little bit more sustainable in terms of like production. So it's crazy that it's dropped so drastically.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is all due to avocados and agave and other more profitable crops, I guess.
Right.
Well, I really hope they don't stop producing, because if I ever stop getting that mushroom infused añejo rum that they make, I'm going to be very upset about it, because it's one of my favorite things that I have in my bar.
We need to go to Uruapan.
But you
need
mentioned
to do a trip where we all go down to Uruapan and check out the production.
Dude,
that'd be
let's make it happen. Yeah. I'm in.
Oh, I better get invited to that trip. Cascanes.
I think
it's just now going to be a running theme for me to take the piss out of Cascanes for not inviting me on this like massive trip that pretty much everyone was invited to.
I agree, man. That was
no, to be fair though, I don't do a ton of tequila stuff, but I should do more. But I feel like I'm outpaced by you guys. I can't even touch tequila now. There's just so much good information on there. What am I adding to this conversation? I could shit on to celebrities with you guys for a bit if you want, but like I think that's where
they're coming into the rum world too.
Maybe that's where my contribution goes.
But before we get into talking about this trip, I want to just dive a little bit more into your background, Lucas. So you said that your wife has connections to Uruapan in that area of Michoacan, but you were born in Brazil, correct?
Yeah.
And from sources, apparently we were born in the same city.
So not born in the same city.
Sorry, raised. I apologize.
But so I was born in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and then I literally was born and my parents moved to Londrina in the Paraná state, so near Argentina, unfortunately. And that's where I grew up.
Hey, wait a second. Hold on.
Sorry, it's just a Brazilian thing. It's like a big brother, little brother relationship,
You realize that my parents are from Buenos Aires, right?
I didn't realize.
Leandro hops into a call with 2 Brazilians and gets outnumbered.
I know. I'm surprised you don't have a Fernet in front of you.
I've got plenty of Fernet. Plenty.
Nice. No, I love Argentina. I love Fernet. But so I grew up there, and then we moved to the U.S. when I was 10 years old, lived in the U.S. for 2 years. That's where I learned English, and we lived half in Spokane, Washington, half in Pasadena in California, and then went back to Brazil. When I went back to Brazil, my mom's family is from the same town. So my mom's family is from Valadares, and I lived there from 12 to I was 16. So my formative teenage years was in Valadares.
That's about the same amount of time I spent there from when I was born to when I was 4. So I'll take it. That'll be good enough. But
that's crazy, man.
And so what? I know when you told me that over lunch, I was like mind blown, dude. It was nuts.
I'm pretty sure.
But what is your relationship with? Probably does. It's so. What is your relationship with cachaça and talking about cachaça? Because you said you have a lot of folks who would ask you to do it, and in general, what's your relationship with it?
I love cachaça. I wouldn't be able to tell you, that I know as much about cachaça that I do about agave spirits. And I've downloaded the norma of cachaça, so all the laws and stuff. I read that a couple of times. It's very interesting. I think there's so much history there, being older than rum and all that. And I think it's it can be a beautiful spirit. I just don't have the knowledge that I have. And I think that's something that I need to work on and that I want to search more, because at this point, it's not just the comments, but I can tell you a lot more about the history of charanda that I can do with cachaça. And I think that's one thing that I need to be more aware of and study a little bit more about cachaça too.
Well, I guess it'd be a good point to just talk about this trip that Leandro didn't get invited on, and you cursed someone with a haunted doll. Do you want to tell people that story? I feel like it's a good platform to tell people.
Yes, and then I got to tell you my haunted doll story.
I know.
I got to tell you my haunted doll story.
So, part of this trip was to see the origins of where Cascanes had their like beginning. You know, like they never made Cascanes there, but like where the idea came to fruition, and it's in this little town, not even a town, like a little village, about 40 minutes away from Tequila. And we did the whole thing there, saw the taberna that they have there. On the way back, there's this like rundown Salsa distillery. There's just pieces of the distillery there, and they grow agave now inside of what used to be the distillery. We're literally like, we were there for maybe like 2 minutes, just took some pictures. When we're coming back on the van, somebody spots this like super creepy doll just on the dirt. It just had a creepy vibe to it. Had dirt all over it. And I also said, I want no part of this. Fuck this doll. I'm out. And then I just got back in the van, and then we're literally driving away, and somebody like shows me the doll. I'm like, who of you got this doll in the van? It was just a joke. It was like in our van, it was, you know? And then Louis was in the other van. And then we stopped to get some Gatorades and stuff at a little gas station shop. This lady gives me a whole like tequila tasting at the at the little shop there at the gas station, and then somebody tells me like, "Oh, like, dude, Louis really did not want to mess with that doll. Like, he wanted no parts of that. He was really like, get that away from me. I don't even want to see it." So then, like, I don't know, maybe I'm Brazilian thing. I was like, I know what I have to do. So I went and got the doll, and I went to the other van, and I was like, "Where's Louis sitting?" And then some people are like, I don't know. And I'm just going to put Doug on blast. But Doug from the Agave was sitting right there. I was like, perfect. So I put the doll right there, and then we leave. And next thing we know, we just hear, fuck this, fuck no.
I was so genuinely shocked because like we had driven for like an hour and a half between this little place where they make the tequila where we saw the doll, and then like to get to this gas station. And my mind completely forgot about the doll. I just figured, oh, whatever, it's fine. We just, it was creepy. It's fine. I walked back in from going to the gas station, and that's the first thing I see in my seat, and I freaked out. But it was genuinely one of the funniest things that has ever happened. It was so fucking funny.
I did feel a little bad. I
That's
walked
hilarious.
away, and I told the guys, I was like, I feel a little bad. Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Nah, I don't feel bad. It was worth it. It was worth it.
I like literally did the exact same thing to Aniga's mom. Almost exactly. So she has this doll. It's about this big, and it looks like it's like an 1800s doll whose head is carved like by hand. Like you can see the little flat like where the knife like carved it, and it's in this 1800s frock. And her mom used to be an interior designer, right? And she specialized in really old furniture. So this thing was probably genuinely from the 1800s, and she had it just like kind of lying around her house. And then one day, Anika and I looked at it, and we were like, what is this creepy doll? It's so weird. Why does she have this weird doll? And not only that, but she had this little 1800s table and chair that were big enough, and they were wrought iron, really heavy wrought iron, and the size for the doll to sit at. And then one day in one of the back rooms of her house, we see this doll sitting at this like table and chairs, and we're just like, this is the creepiest thing. So I got this really brilliant idea that, well, first upon inspection, this is even crazier. Upon inspection, so we're like kind of inspecting the doll, and I opened the doll's dress on the back, and there's the name Clementine written in pencil on her back. All right. So I'm like, this doll is definitely haunted. This doll is haunted, and we're gonna play a trick on your mom. So what we did was we took the doll and we put it in her room. We tucked it into her bed, right? So that when she went to bed that night, the doll was there, and she called us up, and she was like, you guys, this doll was in my room, and did you guys put a doll in my room? And we were like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then every time we would go to her house, we would put the doll somewhere else. One time we put it sitting at her computer with a hand scrawled note that says, "Mommy, I miss you." and we would put it, one time we put it in the passenger seat of her car with the seatbelt on. And we literally played this joke for so long that then our kids got into it. And so now every time we go to her house, and now it's like a huge running joke. We literally put this thing everywhere, all over the house. And the kids have so much fun with it. But we like genuinely scared her for like a month. She was genuinely like terrified of Estelle.
That is insane.
I know.
How, and were you already married when you started doing this?
We've never been married. We're not married.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, we're domestic partners. And we have 2 children.
Okay.
And we've been living together for 17 years. And yes, like this was like maybe 6 years ago or something. But we're not actually.
Okay, good.
I don't see no rings on these fingers. No rings on these fingers. Nobody's locked.
But at least she can't disown you at this point, right?
I know.
She could if she wanted to. It'd be very easy to kick me out, actually, if she really wanted to. But luckily, I haven't. Luckily, I haven't pushed her to that extreme yet.
Oh, that's
Oh
great,
man,
dude. That's insane. That's hilarious. Oh man. Well, Lucas, I probably should have asked this before. I don't know how this got buried further down. So, how did you get started bartending, or was it like a similar? What got you into the restaurant world?
So it was right out of high school. Graduated high school, and my dad was like, "You need to get a job." So I started looking for jobs and couldn't find anything that I kind of wanted to do. And my dad was really good friends with some people that are in the corporate side of Houston's or Hillstone Restaurant Group, and they have one here in Pasadena. And he basically, the guy told him, "Tell Lucas to come in. These are the interview hours, and I'm going to go in." So it wasn't something that's like I was going to get the job. So I just walked in. Got the job as a greeter, so I did greeting or hosting for like 3 years. So I was like from 18. When I turned 20, I kept bugging them like, "Hey, I want to be a bartender when I turn 21. I want to be a bartender." And then became a bartender. And then at 21, I started bugging them even more. I eventually became like the head greeter at the time. And it was one of those things that kind of cliche, but they were like, "You want to be a greeter? A bartender?" I said, "Yes." He was like, "Well, bartender called out. You're going to be a bar back tonight." And I just became a bar back for that shift. And they taught me how to cut lines and how to fill the ice chest and all that kind of stuff. And from there, I became a service well. So at Houston's, there is like the bartender side where you have to be a server for a while and then move on to bartender, or you can just be a service bartender. And that's what I did. And I think that taught me like one speed, because Houston's is got to be quick but consistent, and it taught me all the classics. And granted, after I left Houston's, I saw how their bar program was lacking a lot of things, but it did give me this like blueprint of bartending.
I just love how you were like, and then I took a step back and realized that a lot of things in Houston's bar program was lacking. Such a great way to put that. And then I took a step back and I realized that the only thing good about the Cheesecake Factory's drink program was the blue cheese stuffed olives.
That was my side work, and now I hated having to do the blue cheese olives.
They're the worst. I've also had to do it for a while, and it sucks.
It's the worst.
I dodged that bullet in my career, thankfully.
Nice.
But I did work at a nightclub where I had to deal with people who were like, "Oh, by the way, you're going to have to mop up blood because someone bled all over the bathroom floor," or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
I've had to deal with that type of stuff, which really sucks. So I guess, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah.
I'll take that back. I think I'd rather stuff the olives.
So.
Yeah, you would rather stuff the olives than basically having to don a hazmat suit and clean the bathroom.
Exactly. But my first old fashioned was definitely muddled cherries, oranges, and a sugar cube. That was my first introduction.
I think that was everyone's old fashioned. Isn't that everyone's? Except for this spoiled.
It's true.
This new spoiled generation of kids that don't know how good they got it. They never had to have that old fashioned. They never had the muddled. That was my first old fashioned too, with like crappy well ice and maker's mark. So it's like not only is it overly sweet, but then also it tastes like nothing because they eviscerated it with water before giving it to you.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And
but yeah, that was the introduction into bartending. And then from there on, so then I worked as a service well for a couple of years. And then one of the head servers at Houston's left to start a new concept, with this bartender, Matt Bianconello, which I'm pretty sure Leandro probably knows who he is. And he was all about infusions and all that kind of stuff. He opened the library bar, or worked at the library bar at the Roosevelt here in LA. So he trained me. He was my first like real training into bartending. And then that was Plan Check. And it was an awesome concept that.
Oh, Plan Check. I remember that bar.
Yeah, right. Yeah. At the beginning of Plan Check,
I remember
it was
that bar.
Awesome
that was
concept.
actually like one of the early bars that they were like quality. That was like a
Exactly.
quality bar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the burgers were good. The food was good. The whiskey was great, you know. And that was and I worked there until the concept kind of like changed a bunch of owners, changed the concept a bunch of times. And that's the one that closed within like 2 weeks of the pandemic. But I think there's still one left.
See.
There's still one left in LA. So they kind of just downsized, and I think it's like one of the original owners that got it again. So I worked with them, and then I worked at other restaurants here and there too. But I started just as like, you know, a bartender that had only the day shift, moved on to the hiring manager, buying manager. And I never wanted to be a bar manager because I'd make more money bartending. But they gave me all the responsibilities of a manager, you know?
Oh, they did that thing. I remember getting an interview during the pandemic when I was
done
like,
that as well.
So like during the pandemic, this bar group was like interviewing for a spot, and I knew one of the like kind of district managers of this bar group. And so I was thinking about maybe going back to the bar for like a few shifts or whatever. Or if it was the right concept, maybe I would go in and be like head bartender or something. And so I'm in the interview and the guy's like, so this is what we're looking for. We need like a head bartender, but then that head bartender can have a lot of say in the managerial realm. So you can really run the bar. You can make schedules, and you can make sure that everyone gets to work on time, and you can make sure, then you can run the bar program, but you can also do inventory too. But, you know, the greatest part about it is that we'll pay you the bar manager's salary. I was like, do you think that I just started doing this job? Like, you're basically telling me that you're just trying to make it sound like a great thing that you want to underpay me for doing more work.
Exactly.
You know what? Listening to you say that, as someone who did think it was a really big honor to do so, I did that for 8 months before I wanted to blow my brains out. But I did exactly what you just said that they were trying to sell you.
If you want a manager, pay manager wages or fuck off.
Exactly.
Yep, I did it. I was working 6 days a week doing exactly that, man. It was awful. Anyway.
Oh my God. It's pitched to everyone that's an honor. I've also fallen into that trap earlier in my career as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Lucas, as someone, I guess what I find fascinating too is I love speaking to folks who have been in the industry for a very long time. Leandro and I have talked about it quite a bit. I think that today, something that kind of comes up a lot on like these meme alcohol accounts, because as this industry on the social side has grown, I think it feels like an easy shot at like, like what do they call it? Like influencer bartenders. Like I even saw one this morning. It was like a reminder that these influencer bartenders are not real bartenders. And I'm like, that's an interest. Like, get where the humor of it comes from. And I know that there are some folks who have not been bartenders who are doing this. Yeah. So my question really is, how do you see the intersection of what it is that the three of us do, which is, make content, talk about alcohol and cocktails online, with the physical bar world? Because one of the things that I find fascinating is that I think that there's some hesitation from, media outlets to take, some of what we do seriously. I think that a lot of the physical bar world kind of ignores what's happening on the internet unless it's like shoved in their face to a point where they can't ignore it. And I am answering my own question, and I really care more about your opinion than my own. So if you want to tackle that.
Yeah, man, I really kind of like, I see both ways. Like I've seen some content sometimes that I'm like, man, like for me is make your content the way you want to. What bugs me is when there's misinformation. When you think you have this superiority in this industry, and you come in and you say certain things that we as bartenders know it's not true, or something that, I don't know. Misinformation is what really bugs me. And I think there is a lot of that in the social media world, right? You really got to be careful. And that's something for me that's super important in my content as well. And anytime somebody tells me, hey, just say, like I had this guy yesterday message me saying, you got everything from the Julio 70 wrong. My father-in-law is the master distiller, and you should talk to him. I said, beautiful. Please put me in contact with him. Let me know what I got wrong. And he's like, yeah, they don't use additives. And I was like, hey, so just making sure you're telling me as the son-in-law of the master distiller of Don Julio, which you're claiming to be, that there's no additives. And he said, well, I don't know. I'm not as educated as you to defend myself. Cool. But I appreciate that you're trying to correct me. And if I am supposed to be corrected, I will post another video correcting myself because I really want to make sure that I'm only putting.
Oh my God.
Right,
but like, there's so much of that.
So much of
There's
that.
so much of that. There's so much of that. Oh, I'm going to correct you. I don't know a goddamn thing that I'm talking about, but I'm going to correct you. And then I'm going to admit that I don't actually know what I'm talking about.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah. And like, yeah, that's a side of this whole social media thing that's so infuriating sometimes because they say it with so much conviction that sometimes I doubt myself. Well, man, did I get that wrong? And then I go back and like, oh no, he doesn't know what he's talking about, you know? And so I get that whole thing. And I get why there is this like thought of, you know, these guys are not bartenders and shouldn't be talking. And I've talked to some people in our field that I'm like, oh, are you going to go to Tails? And they're like, what's Tails? And it's just hard for me to come in from a bartending side, talking to somebody that's making money in kind of like industry that we've been in, and they don't know what Tails is, or they don't know those things. But I also then checked myself and was like, this is a new era. They don't have to know what Tails is. You know what I mean? It's a new era of bartending that we're seeing, and it doesn't have to be everything that we talk about. Some people love making hand cocktails, and I call those, and like, you know, and that's cool. You know, like make your content, as long as there's most information, make your content the way you want to. But then there's people like Thirsty Whale, right? Justin, never bartended in his life. He knows more about bartending with, you know, compared to some of the people that I've trained or that have trained me behind the bar, you know? And that's just from reading books, from really being into it and, you know, making sure that there's no misinformation, studying and that kind of stuff. So I appreciate both sides, but I also get why there's some tension on both sides as well, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, I think that Justin's content, and we talked with Jordan about this on an episode recently, and it's like, you know, just because you didn't like work in a bar doesn't disqualify you from talking about it, because I think right now it's shown that it's such a big home hobby. And I think that what Justin has done immaculately well, to a degree that I can only like look at in awe, is he makes it so fun. He breaks it down and makes it so easily accessible for anybody watching, where it's, in my opinion, it's impossible to watch one of his videos and not be sucked in by his personality, because he just makes it like really easy to get people in there. And I think that we should be championing that versus creating these divides, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I do think that there needs to be a clarification of terms, though, because this is where I think bartenders that actually work in the field get a little pissed off. And I think we actually touched on this a little bit in another episode, but the people who make cocktails online, like, I don't think that there should ever be any gatekeeping, right? Like, just because you were a bartender doesn't make you solely qualified to make cocktails online. But the people who have not bartended are not bartenders.
I agree with that.
Because bartending is a very specific thing. They can make a drink. They learned how to make a drink. They're home cocktail makers. They're home drink makers. But they're not bartenders, because bartending requires being behind a bar, learning how to serve people. There's a whole interpersonal element that has nothing to do with the skill of making drinks that actually makes one a bartender. And so therefore, I just think that like some people do get a little bit upset when they're like, this guy's not a bartender. Because they're not bartenders, they're home drink makers, which is just fine. That's 100% great. And I love a lot of that content. There is some misinformation out there, which also irritates me, but there is also a lot of very good content out there. And I don't think that one should have to be a bartender to make this content. Anyone can make the content. You know, if you have a passion for it, you should make the content. 100%.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that.
Where do you see the intersection of what it is that we're doing and like actual bars? Like, what's the future of this? Because I think, like, you know, with the accessibility of making content, anybody can do it on their phone. You know what I mean? Like, I started making stuff on my phone. I still make stuff on my phone. And so I think that, like, should there be more of an intersection between what we do and the actual bar world? Because I feel like even at stuff like Tails, when I was there last year, it felt like it's still very segmented. I'm not saying like it needs to be fully integrated, but I'm wondering, like, you know, should these bars and brands really be leaning more into this and really like adopting more of it?
You mean like more of the social media side?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I
Because
think
right now we see a lot of brands doing it, but I don't know about like locations. Like you have these historic bars that I don't know if they're doing as much as they could be
Right.
with their social media. And maybe that's just a weird theory I have.
And I think, I don't know, man, like, for me, one of the reasons why I want to do a guest shift every so often, either in Mexico or here, is to not lose that feeling of being behind the bar, you know? And I've been pretty welcome to the bars that I've been like. We've done a couple of things at the Wolves here in downtown. I've done a couple of times in Mexico too. And it's been a very welcoming environment. And I also think it's because people know that I have bartender before. And that's another thing to me too. For my own social thing, I want to be behind the more because I feel like be behind the bar more because I feel like that also builds my credibility of being a bartender, you know? Because I do think there's a lot of people, and it's like I catch myself. Somebody like said something, "Oh, everybody can be a bartender now. You just started making this content," and I'm like, "No, I've actually been in the industry for a while." And that was just things that I get in my head. Is like, no, I want to have that credibility of being in the industry more and not just doing the online thing, you know? And I think that's something that's going on in the industry for everybody. And I think there is this hesitation with some bars that they don't want anybody coming in and, you know, joining in for just the social media aspect. But I do think that there's people with credibility, like, I mean, with Leandro, right? I'm not to be a fanboy, but I've learned so much. And you know, when I started bartending, watching Educated Barfly was like a thing, you know, every time I could get on YouTube and watch his content. But that comes with the credibility of what he's done in the industry, you know? So I think there is a way for us to coexist and do both. What I don't like is this, some people come in with this, what's the word? With this entitlement of like, I have this many followers, I made this many drinks, put me in your bar or do this event for me. That's not how it works. I think you build relationships. And I think in this influencer world, people are not so interested in building relationships. They want things immediate and they want to be given what they are entitled to. And I think that's when it gets a little tricky for me.
Right.
It's like, no, you got to work up.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think you're right, though, about something, Louis, that, unless I misunderstood you, but that, you know, bars are not harnessing social media like they should, for sure. But the thing is, though, is that there is a hump with doing social media at bars that like, as, I don't know, quote unquote influencer, or as like a creator, you don't have to, like, as a single creator, you don't have to deal with. And that is that, especially nowadays, people are super, super, super sensitive to being marketed to by companies. So I think we all know, I think we could probably all attest to that. Anytime any one of us do a sponsored post, it does about 50% worse than something that you would just do on your own. Because people have it in their mind that when you just do something that you're not getting paid for, it's more authentic than when you are getting paid for it, which is actually a ridiculous thing, because honestly, getting paid by companies is how we stay in business to do and not only that, but also I've never taken a sponsor that I didn't stand behind. Like, anytime someone comes to me, if it's a spirit that I don't know, I'm like, you gotta send me samples and I gotta like it before I do anything with it, because I refuse. Yeah. But people don't think that way. And so bars harnessing social media have this hump where it's like, yes, they might be doing cool content, but they also are marketing their brand to people, and people are super aware of that. And so their social media might not hit in the same way that something like you or Lucas does would hit, you know? But that being said, I think that brands specifically, and then also bars, should really figure out how to work with people that are in the creator landscape. I don't like the term influencer, because I feel like an influencer is someone who uses their personality to specifically sell products. Whereas I feel like the three of us are more in a creator realm, where we're actually passionate about something and knowledgeable about something that then we pass on. And then the marketing aspect is something that we have to do, but then also something that we like to do. Because, you know, honestly, when I find something like, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of the Empirical Doritos frickin' Spirit. I don't care who knows it. A lot of people think it's trash. I do not give a flying fuck, because it is actually pretty good stuff. And the fact that Lars Williams is behind it, you know, ex-Noma chef, it's good stuff. But, you know, I like to push brands, because I think that one of the things I think is good on your channels and lacking from my channel, which I'm going to remedy, I think, is that you gotta understand the raw materials to be able to make cocktails with them. So you have to understand what these brands are, what these spirits taste like, and every single, if you do a bottle review, it doesn't matter what the brand is, whether they're paying you or not, you're repping a brand kind of, because it's all branded, right? Unless you're making moonshine or bathtub gin, or a brand is something that you are pushing.
Yeah, it's very true.
For sure. But Lucas, I just got a couple more questions for you. I know we're getting up here in time, but the first one is, what are your aspirations with your career from this point forward? Because I feel like at this point, if we were to trace back to what you were saying earlier, how you've been making content at this point for almost, let's call it almost 4 years now, because 2020 was around the beginning of the pandemic. What are some of the aspirations, if you're willing to share, with the career? Is it, like whatever you're willing to share? It's a safe space.
Dude, honestly, I'm at a place right now that I'm really trying to figure that out and what the next 5 years looks like. You know what I mean? I do always want to create. I think that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. I think that's one of the reasons why it was like, let's say, an easy transition from the bar to creating. I've always liked to take pictures, to film, to edit. It's always been a passion of mine. So in some kind of way, I do want to create, you know what I mean? And my page, it's called Lucas Assis because that's my page. I just started sharing stuff there. I have my YouTube of videos there that are there for like 8 years ago that I just made things to because I like editing and taking pictures. So that's an aspect that I always want to be part of my life. But I'm trying to figure it out. Is it like more of a consulting thing? I have no plans to own my own brand. People think that it's so easy to just spend a few $100,000 and get a brand going, and then in 3 months you're a millionaire. It's couldn't be further from the truth. People ask me, what's your advice on starting a tequila brand? And I'm like, don't. That's my advice. God. Like, you've missed this point. It's not what it used to be anymore, and you're just going to be miserable for the next couple of years. Okay. So I don't have any desire on building my own brand. So it's something that I'm trying to figure out and seeing what the next 5 years looks like. I'm having a lot of fun. We're building out our new bar now where I want to focus more on YouTube content, more long format content, not just cocktail, but everything else in this industry, more travel and all that as well. So trying to figure out, see where it takes us in the next 5 years.
I love it. I actually saw a video of you making that bar, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember those days. I want to make another bar now.
That's a pretty cool bar you got there too, man.
So do you not then find yourself, see yourself in social media, or do you see yourself in social media plus doing
other stuff? That's kind of where I want to be, Cool. Social media is awesome, but it's also scary because I just feel like
it is, and it's very up and down.
Exactly. And I talk to Justin about this like almost every day, that it's this feeling that I love that I get to do these things. And it's like something that I can never imagine could be my full-time job. But this feeling that at any time it can be taken away from me is scary, that I need something else to fall back onto and do this more for passion and have something else in the back. That's kind of where my head is at these days. And
it's so funny that you said that, because I was having that exact conversation with my wife last night. Because I've had people ask me, they're like, oh, like you've made it, like with social media, like are you going to sell the restaurant? And I'm like, what? No. First of all, couple of things. A, I didn't make it at all.
Right.
And B, I didn't open my restaurant so that it would be a springboard for me to make content, because that would be the most convoluted way of doing anything on the planet. I wouldn't dedicate 5 years of my life to running a business to then make videos about it. Like, no. And so, but that feeling of like, oh, this can be gone tomorrow, it's terrifying. Yeah. And so I find myself also thinking about like, what are the steps that I can take here forward that will maybe guarantee my future, right? Where, I don't know if I can only do social media. I don't think I ever would,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think you're actually, honestly, in my opinion, and I don't know the inside of your business, Louis, at all, but I feel like you're living the dream, because you have this thing that you can do for passion. And if it does well, it does well. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's fine, because you have your restaurant, and that is also something that you're very passionate about. And also something that is infinitely more sustainable and does not, and even though you have slow periods and busy periods in any business, the problem with social media and what's really scary about it from a person who has been doing it full time for 4 years is that it is very up and down and trends change. And not only that, but also like, look how flooded the cocktail space has gotten just in the last 3 years. When I started, there were 3 people doing anything on the internet, and now it's like everybody. And the thing is that in a sense, when you do content that people like, in a sense, if you want to look at it this way, you're training your replacement, kind of.
Yep.
Or you could be training your replacement.
Good way to put it, right?
You know, so the thing is that it's really from my perspective, wow, Louis killing it, because you've got your restaurant, but then you've got your social media, and you can use social media for fun.
Well,
doesn't matter.
And I don't want to get into this because it's like a whole other can of worms too. The future of a creator economy is a little scary, in my opinion. Looking at how AI might impact it and how easy content creation is becoming. You know, it's a scary time, but don't want to get too into that whole other can of worms. But
another podcast just
that's another episode,
literally just on that. Yeah, could be another episode.
And then
100%.
Lucas, my last question to you, my friend, and I could sit here and talk to you for hours, and it's a shame that you and I only got one day together in Mexico for me to pick your brain, but we'll have to hang out sometime soon.
For sure.
My last question is, if you could make and have a drink with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be, and what would you make?
Dude, honestly, it's going to be a little cliche, but it's somebody that was really special for what I love to do. But like, I would do a Negroni with Anthony Bourdain. That would be
God. I knew he was going to say Anthony Bourdain. I knew it.
You know, like
you're literally like, I think maybe just one person said somebody different.
But that's all right.
I knew it.
I think it explains a lot, which is good. So far, 3 out of the 4 folks that we've interviewed have said Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain.
I knew it. I was like, I'm not going to be original here. But once you asked that, I was like,
was going to say
it. Negroni with Anthony Bourdain.
Who was that? Know? Was that? Oh, Jordan. And actually, Jordan, who didn't say Anthony Bourdain, was like, well, it was going to be Anthony Bourdain, but so it's really 3.5 out of 4.
That's a good point. I forgot he said that.
It's really 3.5 out of 4 people have said Anthony Bourdain. I think we might have to ask like a follow-up question, like what's your favorite word, or what's your favorite sound, or something like, pull some James Lipton, inside the actor studio shit on this, because is everyone in the industry going to say Anthony Bourdain? Because if so, we're going to have to change the question, brother.
I know, right?
Right. I know. I as it came in my mouth, I'm like, we're gonna have to rethink this one. But hey, I'll take it. It makes sense because Anthony Bourdain was a great dude. You know what I mean? Like
that just goes to show how.
Watch.
Dude, it's tough. It's tough,
man. But it's not original. But I knew it was gonna be so. I thought about it too. I was like, there's no way I'm the first one that said that on this thing. So
that's why you led with. Well, it's exactly. Kind of cliche, but
exactly.
Oh man. Well, Leandro, do you have anything else you'd like to ask our friend here?
No, I don't know. I think we kind of covered a lot. I don't want to keep him too long, so I just want to... Lucas, it's always fun hanging out with you, and it's been a fun talk, and I feel like I got to know you just a little bit better. The man behind you guys are... It's funny, because, think about it this way, I'm from Boston. He lives in Boston. You guys are Brazilian. I'm Argentinian, right? His name, all of our names start with the letter L.
That's great.
Yeah.
You guys didn't think of that, did you?
I didn't make those connections. That's great.
The connections. And wait, but also you guys both live in the LA area, so that's a whole other
true. And we live in the LA area, which LA seems to be the unofficial sister city to Boston, because I've never met more Boston people than in LA, and I've never met more LA people than in Boston, which is the truth.
Very interesting, actually. I know a lot of folks who have moved from here that way too. So
that's crazy.
It's like we're living in the Matrix.
I know.
Well, Lucas, man, I also want you, and man, I loved hanging out with you recently. Loved chatting with you, and honestly, I will offer your stuff to folks who ask. You're always the first person that I usually push their content to other people that follow me, and I always say that if you really want to learn more about the stuff that I usually just push them right your way, and it's because of the work that you do, man. And genuinely, thank you very much for being on here, and it was really great to get to chat with you, man.
Thank you, thank you.
I'll be able to go on the Cascanes trip with you guys, and then we can all have a talk.
Yeah, we need to send a letter to Cascanes and say, hey, listen, we only go if Leandro goes.
No, I'm gonna say I need a t-shirt and hat so I can wear it on the next episode. I'm gonna reach out to them for a t-shirt and a hat.
You should.